right, let's talk about something that's on everyone's mind: trust in AI. Today, we're diving into a really groundbreaking new way to measure just how well an AI can actually simulate our world. So let's just start with a simple but huge question. How real is your AI? I mean, we're relying on these systems more and more for some seriously complex stuff, from robotics to figuring out human opinions. But how much can we really, truly trust the picture of reality they're painting for us? What we're really doing is asking AI to be our digital twin. And this is happening everywhere. You've got NVIDIA's Omniverse building these incredibly detailed copies of factories, and you've got large language models being used to simulate how customers might behave. The ultimate goal here is a perfect one-to-one digital copy of a real-world system. But, and this is a big but, there's a fundamental challenge here. It's called the sim-to-real gap. It's that difference, which is often totally unknown, between what the AI thinks will happen and what actually happens in the real world. And as you can guess, that gap can have some pretty massive consequences. So that brings us right to the heart of the problem. How in the world do we actually measure this gap? For the longest time, trying to put a number on the difference between a simulation and reality has been incredibly hard, especially with the kind of complex, brainy AI we have today. So just to be super clear, the sim-to-real gap is the mismatch between what a simulator spits out and what happens in the real world. And this isn't some new idea. It's a problem that's plagued fields like robotics for years. You train a robot perfectly in a simulation, and then it completely fumbles in the real world. It's a huge deal for language models, too, when they're trying to guess how a person would really respond. So what's the fix? Well, some brilliant researchers at Columbia University have come up with a fascinating new way to measure an AI's realism. And the secret sauce is that it works by treating the AI itself as a total black box. And the analogy they use is just perfect. Think of it like a health checkup for an AI. Your doctor doesn't need to know what every single cell in your body is doing to figure out if you're healthy, right? They just look at the test results, the outputs. This new method does the exact same thing, but for AI. And this slide just lays out the difference so clearly. The old way of checking on an AI simulator was insanely complex. You had to know all its internal guts, all the parameters, and trying to calibrate it was basically impossible from a computing standpoint. But this new model-free way, it's a game changer. It doesn't care how the AI works on the inside, it just looks at the answers it gives. And because it's so simple, you can use it on literally any simulator out there. Okay, so how does this checkup actually work its magic? Don't worry, we're not going to get bogged down in a bunch of complex math, because the core idea is actually super elegant and intuitive. It really just boils down to a two-step process. First, they look at real-world data, like a bunch of human survey answers, and they map out the margin of error. This is basically the zone of plausible real human answers. Then, and this is the really clever part, they calculate the worst-case scenario. They measure the absolute furthest the AI's answer could possibly be from any point inside that real-world zone. And what you get at the end isn't just a simple grade like an A or a B. No, you get a full-on diagnostic report, what they call a quantile curve. This curve gives you a complete picture of the AI's performance. It shows you how it does on the easy questions where it shines, but also on those tricky edge cases where it makes its absolute biggest mistakes. You get the whole story, not just a simple average. Okay, so the researchers have this powerful new tool. The big question is, what did this AI checkup actually find when they pointed it at some of the most advanced AI models we have today? And that brings us to the real-world application, a fidelity report card for large language models. The researchers put a bunch of today's top models to the test to see just how well they could simulate what humans actually think. So here's how they did it. They started with this huge data set of real human opinions. We're talking responses from over 96,000 people from all over the world. Then they basically asked the AI models the exact same survey questions to see how close they could get to predicting the average human response. The whole goal was to measure that gap between the AI's guess and the actual human data. And the results? Well, they're pretty fascinating. This table gives you the quick and dirty summary. Now remember, for this test, a lower score is better. It means the AI simulation is closer to reality. And as you can see, GPT-4o came out on top with the smallest gap, making it the most accurate simulator in this particular test. Other models, like those from Llama and QN, had a much bigger difference between what they predicted and what people really thought. But here's where it gets really interesting. When you look beyond just that one score, those performance curves, the quantile curves, showed that GPT-4o wasn't just good on average, it was the most consistent across all the different kinds of questions. Other models that were pretty strong overall still had a harder time with the weird outlier questions. And this tells us something really important. Even the best models we have today still have trouble with those rare but really bad misses, those unexpected moments where the simulation just completely falls apart. Okay, this is all really cool from a research perspective, for sure. But why does it actually matter to us in the real world? This is where we go from a cool academic idea to something that builds real, tangible trust. This method is a total game changer for how we can deal as AI simulators. For the first time, we can build trust that's based on actual numbers, on evidence. Businesses can make smarter decisions because they finally understand where a simulator's limits are. We can compare these incredibly expensive models objectively, based on how they actually perform, not just on marketing hype. And maybe most importantly, we can manage risk because we can see and plan for an AI's worst-case errors, those things that report card curve makes totally visible.
So if there's one thing to take away from all this, it's this. The whole point of this research isn't just to have a horse race to find the number one best AI. It's about getting a much deeper, more nuanced understanding. It's about knowing exactly how good a model is, where its blind spots are, and ultimately knowing precisely when we should and when we definitely shouldn't trust its version of reality.
And that leaves us with one final, really big question to chew on. For the first time ever, we have a reliable, universal way to measure how realistic an AI is. So the question isn't really, can we make them more real anymore? The question now is, how real do we actually want them to be?